The Pauline Tully. Nomad, 8 minutes.
I want to first of all commend the regional group on raising this important matter. It's an issue that's discussed regularly at the Disability Matters Committee, and it's also raised at practically every meeting I attend with disabled people. It is estimated that by 2026, disabled people will account for roughly 16% of the population, and it is crucial that this cohort of Irish society has access to transport supports. And people with disabilities should be able to live full and active lives within their communities, but many obstacles remain that work to prevent them doing so, and access to transport supports is one of them. Improving access to public transport is important in its own right, but it is unreasonable to suggest it can address the transport needs of many disabled people who live in rural areas or struggle to get to bus stops or stations. Without access to personal transport supports, many disabled people cannot do what others take for granted, including working, visiting family and friends, shopping, or any other aspect of life where mobility is essential. So up until 2013, the mobility allowance and the motorised transport grant were in place to support disabled people with their transport needs. The mobility allowance supported transport costs for individuals who were unable to walk or to use public transport and who satisfied a means test. And while the motorised transport grant was a means-tested payment for disabled people who needed to buy a car in order to retain employment. The 2021 Ombudsman report, grounded on equal access for people with disabilities to personal transport schemes, focused attention on the fact that these transport supports for people with disabilities were inadequate, unfair and inequitable under the Equal Status Act. The report spelt out that in 2013 the government decided to discontinue both the mobility allowance and the motorised transport grant to new applicants. At that time, the then government committed to developing an alternative scheme, but we're 10 years on and no alternative scheme has been put in place. Considering the need for some disabled people to use private transport, especially in rural areas, the closure of the mobility allowance and the motorised transport grant has significantly impacted their ability to participate fully in daily life. And this has precluded them from accessing education, as well as from participating in their communities, socialising and accessing healthcare. Considering the additional transport costs that disabled people face, which were highlighted in the Indecon Cost of Disability report, it is essential that these schemes are replaced with a 21st century fit-for-purpose scheme that alleviates these costs and enables disabled people to fully participate in society and complies with the Equal Status Act. The grounded report also pointed out that the only remaining transport support available for disabled people is the Disabled Driver and Disabled Passenger Scheme. And this scheme provides a range of tax reliefs linked to the purchase and use of a specially constructed or adapted vehicle by drivers and passengers with a disability. However, the report goes on to highlight that the scheme is inadequate to meet the needs of many people living with a disability, as the medical criteria for eligibility is excessively restrictive. It is so restrictive, in fact, that the entire Disabled Driver Medical Appeals Board resigned in November 2021 after expressing concern about how the scheme was being handled. And amid ongoing concerns, it is too difficult to obtain a primary medical cert. And I am not surprised. In looking at the figures, from 401 appeals assessed in 2017, only 12 were successful. In 2018, there were 20 successful appeals from a total of 386 that year. In 2019, 9 out of 424, and in 2020, there were 4 out of 116. I mean, members of the previous appeals board indicated that unless you had a progressive condition, your appeal was not going to be successful. So unless your condition had worsened significantly from you were first assessed for the primary medical cert, and that didn't apply to a lot of people. The resignation of the board has led to a large backlog of appeals. As of the 31st of December 2022, according to a reply I recently received to a parliamentary question, there were 759 people waiting an appeal hearing. Replacing the board has taken a long time, and only recently, after 2 expression of interest campaigns were undertaken, a significant or sufficient number of suitable candidates were found and have completed Garda vetting. Unfortunately, however, for those awaiting their appeal, it seems that further delays will be inevitable, as it has recently been brought to my attention that the National Rehabilitation Hospital has indicated that it wishes to cease its involvement with the scheme. And as the National Rehabilitation Hospital facilities and secretarial service are integral to the operation of the Appeals Board, Minister McGrath has, in a reply to a parliamentary question, responded to me that it may take time to put in place feasible and appropriate alternative arrangements to enable the appeals process to recommence. So, in the meantime, more and more disabled people who have been turned down for a primary medical cert will join the growing waiting list to have their appeal heard and will be unable to access the scheme. But even when the board and scheme is fully up and running, it has been acknowledged by the Department of Finance, which currently administers the scheme, that it is no longer fit for purpose. It does not meet the needs of a significant group of those with disability and with mobility impairments. It is significantly divergent from best international practice, and it does not and will never operate to the standards expected of a 21st century operational model. Now, while this acknowledgement is welcome, what is needed now is action and putting in place a new scheme, one that will provide vehicle adaptations based on the need of a disabled person and not on a restrictive medical criteria. These matters have been raised repeatedly with the government. People with disabilities are paying the price for this lack of leadership. They are being denied their rights under the UNCRPD to live full, independent and inclusive lives. The UNCRPD was ratified by government in March 2018, and it sets out under Article 9 accessibility that is a precondition for persons with disabilities to live independently and participate fully and equally in society. However, when ratifying the UNCRPD, the government chose not to ratify the optional protocol, which would have enabled people with disabilities to make complaints to the UN about potential rights violations. A member of the UN Committee at the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, when speaking at the Joint Committee on Disability Matters about the government not ratifying the optional protocol, suggested that Ireland is not confident or comfortable enough to open itself up to international scrutiny. And this is having a major impact on the personal lives of disabled people. It's blocking their path to being able to live independently and to socialise and to work. So I do not feel there is any sense of urgency in addressing the matter of transport supports for disabled people. The Transport Working Group, which was established in 2020, only recently finalised their report for the Minister on proposal for the development and coordination of enhanced transport and mobility support options for persons with disability. So it is shameful that in 2023 disabled people are still not able to participate equally and actively in their community and work. What is needed now from government is action on putting in place a new 21st century fit-for-purpose scheme that alleviates the transport costs people with disabilities face, including vehicle adaptations based on the need of the disabled person and not on a restrictive medical criteria, and which complies with the Equal Status Act. This needs to happen if we are to enable disabled people to fully participate in society. So once again, I'd like to commend the regional group for raising this important matter. My colleagues in Sinn Féin and I will be supporting the motion, and I urge all other TDs, including those on the government benches, to also support it.